Good morning and welcome to ValConnect 2023 Day 2. Validation 4.0 makes Pharma 4.0 credible. That's my keynote, and I'm Ejaz Hussain, a board member of the advisory committee for ValGenesis. I have been associated with ValGenesis from its inception more than 18 years ago. The notion of validation 4.0 and Pharma 4.0 are common terms in many different discussions. I wish to particularly acknowledge and appreciate the ongoing discussions at the International Society for Pharmaceutical Engineering. My focus on validation 4.0 builds on that in some aspects, but it is distinct in that it is about human development, professional development, and maturity of people and professions in a system, a socio-technical system. And the idea that I want to present to you is we live and work in socio-technical systems, and the maturity of our systems is a reflection of our population maturity. And in a population of adults, the maturity ranges from a low order of consciousness to a high order of consciousness. Which of those consciousness is necessary for validation 4.0 is what I wish to discuss with you. To frame the ensuing discussion with you, I'm drawing inspiration from a hermetic principle: as above, so below, as within, so without. To consider the chaotic and complex characteristics of socio-technical systems in which we live and work. Currently, we are experiencing chaos in multiple systems, in the geopolitical systems, in the financial systems, and those have strong bearing and influences on our systems, our quality management system, our corporate management systems, and so forth. In these difficult times, sense making is a mode of thinking, and validation of sense making is what I wish to pursue with you. In observing, making sense, and seeking a deeper understanding on ways to empower minds in chaos to manage materials, machines, and money. In this sense, the title of my talk can read Validation 4.0 of Professionals and Corporations Make Progress in Pharma 4.0 Credible. And one of the elements of Pharma 4.0 is a smart factory, fully automation, predictive, adaptive factory that runs on its own without humans and without human error. That's an aspiration. But my talk is not going to be about smart factory. My talk is going to be about smart humans. And I link this discussion to the scientific training and education requirements in the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act, and also under GMP regulations 21 CFR 211.25. Education, training, and experience to qualify ourselves to work in a GMP environment. The IQ aspects: installation qualification, operational qualification, process qualifications, and continued process verifications that we think about in the context of machines. How might that relate to our installation qualification, our hiring, our orientation, and our training to be ready to operate, qualified for operating certain standard operating procedures? I have been associated with ValGenesis since November of 2005. ValGenesis is a platform for paperless process validation that used to be the theme originally, but it is really a tool for modern validation, clearly for manufacturing processes, but I venture to say in using the validation lifecycle management systems for the operations that we want to validate, the nature and how we use it in and of itself is an opportunity for a validation life spiral approach to management of our professional development. And with the launch of Validation Lifecycle Management 4.0, our CEO Shiva made a statement. Our purpose-built solution is designed to enable the application of critical thinking upfront. Many of you are new to ValGenesis, and many of you are coming from different sectors, new to pharmaceuticals or life science. Saying that to a scientific engineering community that we must put critical thinking up front, and doing so in the year 2023 has a deeper meaning. Why haven't we done critical thinking all throughout the history? We claim ourselves to be scientists and engineers, and yet we struggle to do critical thinking. That actually makes the case for validation 4.0 in the context of human development, professional development. The challenge we confront is much bigger. We live in a postmodern, post-truth world in an experience economy. Experience is like a commodity now. So the question I have is, how can we leverage the validation lifecycle management system in the material world and think about it as validation life spiral management system for our individual and team development? Because the march towards 2030, we are left with two choices: move towards totality of evidence or something else. When experience matters more, pay attention to experience. Experiential learning is likely to be a critical path forward now. The word validation, if you look at the meaning etymologically, the meaning of validation generally is telling you about human development and maturity. The genesis of validation stems from our need to control, and it evolves under the influence of our desire and opinions. In a rule-based society, it also has a legal mandate aspect. But the ideal situation is validation be evidence-based, based on scientific method. So validation in an immature society can be accepted as opinions. Later on, the opinions get mandated into laws. And that's what we have observed. When I joined the FDA in 1995, the struggles that I was seeing with validation was process qualification of 3 batches without regard to the level of complexity and level of certainty needed for a particular risk mitigation strategy. And in 1993, in a court case, that opinion got mandated as a law. And it has taken over 20 years to move the needle away from opinions to a scientific basis for process validation, which I call validation 3.0, which is the US FDA guideline 2011, which brought in a life cycle approach to process validation and continued process verification. So that was 2011. A very simple way of thinking about validation, internal validation, is a simple thing that I want to share with you is we have a yearning to look good as teenagers at all cost. And then we have a yearning to be accepted by our group. We want to be considered as good by a group. And at some point, we get through experience internal courage and the knowledge with experience that we have achieved internal validation. We know within ourselves what validation should be, not what it is. Doing good and having empathy to see good in others despite their shortcomings, those are the stages of development in very, very simple terms. From moving from seeking external validation to being self-assured and internally validated, that's where validation 4.0 comes in. And these stages of development are nested. If even though I'm internally validated, I'm self-assured, I still want to look good, but in a different way than if I'm not internally validated. So these are nested stages in adult human development. A lot has changed since the inception of ValGenesis. Today, it's a multinational corporation with many, many new hires coming in on essentially daily basis. Many new associates. Do we have one quality voice? One Quality Voice is a program that FDA initiated in the year 2015. I'm not going to get into that, but the whole idea is how do I know? I haven't had a chance to interact with a lot of the new associates. So what I did was I looked at who are connected to me on LinkedIn. Danilo was one who connected with me. And LinkedIn says, started at ValGenesis 16 years, 1 month after I did. So I was quite impressed by his statement of what he's trying to accomplish at ValGenesis. Get a holistic view of the entire validation process. Holistic view from different viewpoints is what I can contribute to his thinking there. Reduce errors and risk. What type of errors? Errors of omission and commission require a different strategy. Experience new speed and efficiency. Yes, but without compromising our principles, our first principles. Experience with integrity, building on data integrity. That's what I wanted to talk about, how we optimally leverage diversity to improve user experience and service experience of within ValGenesis. In my 35 plus years of experience, I had the opportunity to view pharmaceutical quality process validation from multiple viewpoints, from as an academic, as US FDA, and in many different corporate settings, and then back to academia as the president of National Institute. And I continue my practice presently as advisor at ValGenesis and others such as Applied Smart Factory, Continuous Pharmaceuticals, Dian Pharmaceuticals, and many, many more. I've also served as a advisor to consulting firms. For example, here was KPMG, worked with Ernst & Young to build their fraud detection, fraud unit to deal with data integrity issues in India and so forth. And my viewpoint has always been an advocacy of education training. And more recently, but last decade, I have focused my attention on experience, and I've tried to share the lessons I have learned in many, many writings, such as, for example, a blog on ValGenesis blog on 4 life science lessons from the PAT to quality by design journey. Briefly, one of the key lessons that I have learned, which I should have learned earlier, was continuous professional development is essential, and that aspect needs to be structured, formalized, not remain ad hoc. Adult human development empowers our smart future is an aspect that I think is key, because we are in a revolution, industry 4.0, and the value contributions of humans in manufacturing in particular is an open question. Do we prefer to manufacture pharmaceuticals free of humans and human errors is sort of one mode of thinking, or how do we ensure that human errors do not even also not occur in smart factories, because who is designing the smart factory and who is training the artificial neural networks and so forth is human. So the human error doesn't go away from that, from my perspective. Education training alone cannot overcome displacement by AI. Experience, integrity matter. That's the theme of my talk today. Hone quality in through research before and after approval. That is a notion of research, not necessarily a laboratory-based research. Research can be thought experiments, a reflective thinking, reflective writing, as I do on LinkedIn and so forth, or this blog post. I think are some of the elements of this learning that I want to elaborate on. We seek holistic view of process validation, and validation lifecycle management system goes a long way towards helping us achieve that. But at the same time, I wish to highlight and emphasize that we still need to seek holistic view from different viewpoints. All of us need to practice transitioning from intricate details to the bigger picture and vice versa. Get good at doing so effortlessly with seamless precision. In my mind, good means valid, and valid is scientific evidence. A holistic view from different viewpoints is necessary for continued development and maturity. At the same time, different viewpoints pose different challenges because there are conflicts, there are dissonance associated with different viewpoints. We debate, we argue, and so forth. When we move towards a different viewpoint and we want to appreciate a different viewpoint, we are outside our comfort zone. And it creates a disorienting dilemma in certain cases, as that happened to me when I moved to FDA from academia, because the notion of validation being an opinion and the development reports not being utilized for a review of CMC submissions was a disorienting dilemma. I said, how do you set specifications on a scientific basis? How do you know you have reached a process validation is ensuring you stability and state of control, like in statistical process control of your manufacturing process? Those were disorienting dilemma because we were dealing with recurring errors, recalls, and those continue today also. So one of the lessons in building the team, the PAT team at FDA, these are some pictures from that, is disorientation causes discomfort and dissociation. The inspectors did not want to collaborate with the CMC reviewers, and when you bring them into the same room, you can see the body language. Disorienting dilemmas, we try to break that impasse by making us dance. Dancing for team science was an effort. But reflecting back on that was we tried to reorient ourselves in a disorienting dilemma situation. I wish I had focused more on making common sense. And that's what I want to talk to you about. Not repeating mistakes is a sign of maturity. Recurring errors become mistakes, and mistakes recurring illustrate immature systems. Root cause unknown is also a sign of immaturity, and that stems from the fact that pharmaceutical science and pharmaceutical engineering have evolved with a lag time following the laws and regulation. So the imbalance between science, technology, and laws and traditions is the dilemma that we face. As a result, our system focuses on errors of commission and corrects those. In the sense, errors of commissions is you did something you were not supposed to do. we are reasonably good at correcting that. But errors of omission are you did not do what you were supposed to do is something we failed to correct, because the science and engineering aspects have lagged, and the knowledge that is needed for objective risk assessment comes later on. And the challenge what we face is the words FDA approved and validated have such a strong psychological effect that we don't want to look and correct something that we should have done in the first place. That's a big challenge. So this was sort of my presentation at the critical path in the initiative challenge at FDA Advisory Committee in 2004, where I had imagined the development reports to really give you the nitty-gritty connections, interactions between every aspect of the active pharmaceutical ingredient formulation, manufacturing process, and so forth. And we're not there yet. When a deviation occurs, when an out of specification finding comes, or we have a FDA inspection and a warning letter, we easily find ourselves in over our heads. That's the title of a book by Professor Robert Keegan at Harvard, who essentially has espoused for a constructive theory of adult human development. Constructive means making meaning. We construct our own meaning. And the 4 stages of that development process is impulse control, becoming a control freak, imperialist, socialized, and being self-authored, and being self-transforming. At minimum, I posit that all of us at our job level, at our responsibility level of responsibility, should be self-authored in the procedures we take responsibility for. And that is stage 4 in adult human development. And that's validation 4.0 from my perspective. And this is an interpretation of scientific training and experience to assess evidence of effectiveness, failure, and responsibly as part of the FD&C Act, as well as 21 CFR 211.25, where to qualify for working in a GMP environment, everybody needs to possess, including consultants, needs to possess education, training, and experience adequate for that purpose. So how, at the bottom are the maturity model for smart factory, a biopharm smart factory, where we go from pre-digital plant, digital silos, connected plant, predictive plant to adaptive plant. So we really want to move towards adaptive plant where continuous improvement is a norm, and we get over the root cause investigation mindset and a trap of recurring errors. And we need smart minds for managing smart machines, materials, and money. That becomes critical for success of Pharma 4.0, and I think that's the directional vector I want you to think about. From theory to practice. So taking the constructive theory of adult human development, I had an opportunity to reflect upon the maturity of the struggles to mature in our sector. And in 2017, I wrote this article, which is available online, which I encourage you to read, How to Break the Pharmaceutical 2 through 3 Sigma Barrier Like Amgen. And I had no association with Amgen, but I had an opportunity to look from outside in, and also discuss it with the chief quality officer, how my analysis reflected their efforts. So please read this paper. But the key here is we are all socialized. Tell me what to do, FDA, and I'll do it was the mentality. Amgen was in that situation in 2004, and their words were, if I don't look, there is no problem. That was the dominant narrative within Amgen. The senior management said, no, that's not acceptable to us. We want to change. And to change, they had an elaborate program to get to a low error rate of 3.4 defects per million opportunities for every process in the factories. And they have done that. And I think that story is worth looking at. So Don't use, don't tell with respect to new technology was the words from Pfizer at the FDA Science Board meeting. And if I don't look, there's no problem was the words which, for me, it illustrates a socialized mind. Tell me, FDA, what to do, because we have an immunity to change, and there is a change prevention system, a mindset, as well as the regulatory aspect. But the feeling system, the experiential system, is something we have struggled to deal with. Clearly, knowledge management is a key. Knowledge system is another element for that. And diffusing the knowledge throughout the organization is a key challenge. And going paperless makes that so seamless that when you think of doing that on paper in silos, it's literally impossible. So validation lifecycle management, the paperless aspect is in and of itself is a huge jump. But then having a structured, systematic view of the big picture on your iPad or on your computer is an amazing opportunity to break the barriers to process validation in a holistic sense. But it depends on having a critical mass of high order of consciousness, especially the leadership having a fifth order of consciousness, where their intention, their management objective is to prevent errors, and they empower all of their staff to be at the fourth order of consciousness, being self-authored in what they're doing, and to solve problems at their level and not have to wait for a separate team to solve the problems. That is really the reason for validation 4.0 at minimum, with the critical mass of leadership having a higher order of consciousness to guide and to mentor the rest of the organization to move forward. I've spent a lot of time thinking and writing about culture of quality. I will not get into the details here, and you will have access to my presentation on culture of quality in the blog post I have written to accompany this presentation. So please look at that, and I think you will access that. The only point I want to make here is we want to make quality normal, easy, and rewarding. And that's the objective we need to have. And how does validation lifecycle management, the computer technology, help us do that is something I wish to really ask you to think about. Remember, a grain of wise subjectivity tells us more about the real world than any amount of objectivity. And I have shared this the slide here. The root cause unknown can point to legacy common causes as a real case example of for narrow therapeutic index drugs, we are still missing critical quality attributes. In 2020s, we are still doing that. And to critically risk assess common cause variation, we have to make it common sense. In 2004, the PAT guidance defined process understanding, and we had assumed valid sense making is automatic, but unfortunately, that assumption was incorrect. How to make common sense good, valid, is a question that I have struggled with, and after 9/11, I was exposed to the notion of sense making at a sense making symposium in October 2001. And that being is, I distilled that down into a very smart shepherding practice newsletter that I write on LinkedIn. So please good look at that. The whole notion is that that we have to have integrity of experience. What does integrity of experience mean? Is take a moment to assess your experience. How are you feeling? How are you thinking? What are you thinking? And what are you doing? Are those aligned synchronously and aligned with your principles and values? If not, then you have dissonance. And the decisions you will make and the sense you will make would be from a lower order of consciousness. So take a moment, breathe deeply, and rethink so that your intention, your feelings, your thinking, and your actions are all aligned with your values and principles. That's the bottom line of that, and have elaborated that further in my writings on smart shepherding, and I encourage you to start reading those. Again, I wish to emphasize that the knowledge on which many of the products are developed and marketed really is in need for correction. And especially because science and engineering aspects of formulation and manufacturing have evolved with a lack to the regulatory approval and the old ways of validating. And therefore, we need new prior knowledge, and there are no easy ways of doing this. So you have to engage with stakeholders. You have to take a systems of systems view to address this, because not all solutions are within your organization, within your system. Some of the challenges are outside your system, and stakeholder engagement, example, what ISP is doing, what PDA does, and having ValGenesis be a part of those discussions and engagement to address those issues which are outside your control, which are part of a different system, really is an important element that ValGenesis needs to emphasize. ValGenesis already has a smart solution with attention on satisfying user experience and satisfying experience within the organization of ValGenesis at all levels. Really is an opportunity that you should not underestimate, especially since we are in an experience economy. There are many meanings we can make of the acronym SMART. In machines, such as hard disk, where it originated, self-monitoring, analyzing, and reporting technology. For our mind, it self-monitoring our emotions, our thoughts, and our intentions, analyzing to make sure why are they not aligned, researching ways of aligning them, and testing with through practice of how we align our feelings, thinking, and our decisions and actions really is a way to think about making things common sense, at the same time being smart in mind. So I wish you all the best. In every dark cloud, there is a silver lining. You choose to see the darkness, or you choose to see the silver lining. It's wise to see the silver lining, and ValGenesis has been doing that since its inception. And I wish you the very best. Be smart, and be smart in all aspects. Thank you for listening.